The morning dew glistened on the weathered wooden doors of Easton's seed vault, located in a remote corner of what was once Nebraska. The underground chamber housed thousands of heirloom seeds collected over generations. Easton ran his calloused fingers over the carved patterns on the door, symbols of growth, harvest, and renewal that his great-grandmother had etched decades ago. The 62-year-old farmer's morning ritual began as always, checking atmospheric conditions, recording soil temperatures, and most importantly, communing with his seeds. While most modern agriculture had moved toward hydroponic systems and laboratory-engineered crops, Easton remained steadfast in his role as a seed keeper, preserving genetic diversity that corporations had long abandoned in favor of standardized, patented varieties. "Morning, friends," he whispered to the glass jars containing his treasures. Rows upon rows of carefully labeled containers held the genetic memory of crops that had sustained humanity for millennia. Corn, with kernels of deep purple and speckled gold. Tomatoes in shapes that modern consumers would find alien. Beans whose ancestors had traveled across oceans in the pockets of desperate, hopeful migrants. The morning quietude was broken by the sudden blare of his old transistor radio. The interplanetary broadcast network, a luxury few farmers bothered with, crackled to life with an emergency bulletin. Reports continue from the Zephyrian Empire of widespread crop failures on all 17 of their core worlds. Imperial scientists remain baffled as genetically identical crops succumb to what appears to be a previously unknown pathogen. Emperor Zolon has declared a state of emergency as food reserves drop below critical levels. The High Council reports that billions face starvation if... Easton shook his head. The Zephyrians, despite their technological superiority and interstellar capabilities, had built their entire agricultural system on monoculture, countless planets growing genetically identical crops. Any Earth farmer could have predicted the outcome. One successful pathogen could collapse their entire food supply. He returned to his work, carefully extracting seeds for the day's planting. The Zephyrians had made contact with Earth nearly 15 years ago, bringing advanced technology and the promise of interplanetary cooperation. But they had shown little interest in Earth's primitive agricultural methods, dismissing soil-based farming as inefficient and archaic compared to their sterile hydroponic systems. The light in the vault suddenly shifted, an unnatural blue glow emanating from the center of the room. Easton froze, seeds clutched in his palm. The air shimmered and distorted, molecules rearranging themselves into a perfect circle of pulsing energy. Within the circle, a figure took shape, humanoid, but unmistakably alien. Tall and slender with iridescent skin that shifted between azure and emerald. The being solidified before him. Easton recognized the elaborate headdress immediately from news broadcasts, the royal insignia of Zephyrian nobility. The being's eyes, 3 of them, arranged in a triangle, blinked rapidly, adjusting to Earth's light. When she spoke, her voice carried the melodic, multi-tonal quality characteristic of her species. "I seek the one called Easton, keeper of Earth's living seeds." Easton straightened his weathered frame, seeds still clutched protectively in his hand. "You've found him, and you would be..." "I am Princess Ivara of House Zolon, daughter to Emperor Zolon, heir to the 17 worlds of the Zephyrian Empire." She made a gesture that might have been a bow, though it looked more like a graceful undulation of her upper body. "And I come to you in desperate need." The blue light surrounding her flickered, and a holographic projection filled the room, images of withered fields stretching across alien landscapes, crowds of Zephyrians with hollow cheeks and desperate eyes, storehouses standing empty. "Our empire faces extinction," Ivara continued, her central eye fixed on Easton, while her peripheral eyes scanned the seed vault with obvious curiosity. "Our scientists have failed us. Our hydroponic systems lie contaminated." The pathogen adapts faster than we can engineer resistance. Easton set his seeds carefully on a nearby workbench. I heard the reports. Monoculture across 17 planets. Couldn't have designed a better collapse if you'd tried. The princess's skin flushed a deeper blue. Embarrassment. Perhaps. Or anger. Our methods have sustained trillions for centuries. Until they didn't, Easton replied simply. That's the problem with putting all your eggs in one basket. Eventually, something comes along and tips the basket over. We do not need your Earth proverbs, Ivara snapped, her headdress vibrating with emotion. We need solutions. Our analysts have studied your archival records. Before your world embraced molecular agriculture, you practiced methods that maintained crop diversity and resilience. Methods that you, she gestured at the seed vault, still preserve. Easton raised an eyebrow. You want farming advice from a primitive earth grower? I thought your kind considered us technologically backwards. Pride has no place when children starve, Ivara replied, her voice suddenly softer, more vulnerable. The hologram shifted to show Zepyrian children, their normally vibrant skin dull and papery. I am not too proud to beg. Earthkeeper, teach me your ways of seed and soil. Teach me how your ancestors weathered crop disasters. I will learn. I will kneel in dirt if it means saving my people. The farmer studied the alien princess, her elaborate garments that likely cost more than his entire farm, her technologically advanced translation device, the desperation in her three-eyed gaze. He looked down at the seeds in his palm, Cherokee purple tomatoes, preserved through generations of careful selection. Your people won't like it, he said finally. What I teach goes against everything your empire believes about efficiency and control. They need not like it. They need only survive. Ivara made the undulating bow again, deeper this time. Will you help us? Easton closed his fingers gently around the seeds. I'll help, but we do this my way. No shortcuts, no technological improvements. You learn from the ground up, just like every farmer's child for the past 10,000 years. Agreed, said the princess, her skin shifting to a hopeful turquoise. When do we begin? We already have. Easton opened his palm, revealing the seeds. Everything starts with understanding these. The next morning found Princess Ivara kneeling in fresh soil, her royal garments exchanged for simple earth clothes that still looked incongruous against her alien physiology. Easton had brought her to his main planting field, 5 acres of dark, rich earth that had never known chemical fertilizers or synthetic pesticides. Your hands, Easton instructed, need to feel the soil, not with gloves, not with sensors. Actual contact. Ivara hesitantly removed the protective barriers she'd insisted on wearing. Her 6-fingered hands, with their delicate webbing between each digit, hovered uncertainly over the ground. It's just dirt, Easton encouraged. It won't bite. On Zepyrian worlds, soil is sterilized before contact, she explained, lowering her hands with visible reluctance. Microbes are considered contaminants. That's your first mistake right there. Easton knelt beside her, scooping up a handful of earth and letting it trickle through his fingers. This isn't dirt. This is living soil. There are more organisms in this handful than there are stars in your empire. They're not contaminants. They're allies. Ivara tentatively touched the soil, her skin flinching at the contact before relaxing. Her expression shifted from disgust to surprise to curiosity as her sensitive skin detected the complex ecosystem within. I feel movement, energy exchanges, microscopic communities. That's right. Bacteria, fungi, microarthropods. They're all working together, breaking down organic matter, cycling nutrients, creating structure. Easton gestured around them. Look at this field. No synthetic inputs for over 100 years. Yet it produces more food per acre than most industrial operations. How is this possible? Our calculations indicate that without precise nutrient delivery, crops should fail. Easton laughed. Life found a way to grow food long before scientists started calculating optimal nutrient ratios. The problem with your hydroponic systems isn't that they're high-tech. It's that they're too simplified. You've removed all the complexity that makes natural systems resilient. He guided her through the basics of soil structure, explaining how different organisms created pathways for water and air, how symbiotic relationships between fungi and plant roots extended the plant's reach for nutrients, how biodiversity in the soil microbiome provided natural checks and balances against potential pathogens. Ivara absorbed the information with the intensity of someone whose civilization depended on it, which, Easton reminded himself, it did. Her 3 eyes rarely blinked as he spoke, and her translator device occasionally requested clarification on concepts that had no Zephyrian equivalent. By midday, they had moved from soil theory to actual planting. Easton demonstrated how to prepare a seedbed, explaining the importance of depth, spacing, and timing. In your hydroponic systems, each plant grows in isolation, yes? He asked. Ivara nodded. Maximum efficiency. Each plant receives precisely what it requires, without competition. That works fine until something goes wrong. Easton replied. In nature, plants don't grow in isolation. They grow in communities. He gestured to a plot where corn, beans, and squash grew together. This is what my ancestors called the 3 sisters. The corn provides a structure for the beans to climb. The beans fix nitrogen from the air into the soil, feeding the corn and squash. The squash leaves shade the ground, preventing weeds and conserving moisture. The princess studied the interplanting with newfound appreciation. Cooperative symbiosis, rather than isolated optimization. Exactly. Monocultures are vulnerable. Diversity creates resilience. Easton handed her several different seed varieties. Now you try. Plant these companions together, just as I showed you. Ivara's movements were hesitant at first, her royal upbringing evident in her discomfort with manual labor. But as the afternoon progressed, her confidence grew. By sunset, she had planted several companion groups, carefully marking each with location, date, and combination. Tomorrow, Easton said as they walked back to the farmhouse, we'll talk about saving seeds and breeding for resilience. That's where the real magic happens. Magic? Ivara's translator seemed confused by the term. Figure of speech. I mean the powerful evolutionary processes that create adaptability, something your empire seems to have forgotten. As they approached the house, a vehicle came bumping down the long driveway, Pete's ancient biodiesel truck. Easton's nearest neighbor and fellow seedkeeper had promised to bring dinner, unaware they'd be feeding alien royalty. Pete, a burly man in his 50s with a wild beard and perpetually soil-stained hands, took the presence of an alien princess at Easton's dinner table with remarkable equanimity. So the monoculture finally collapsed, eh? He said, serving up plates of garden vegetables and fresh bread. Been warning about that since they first made contact. Our scientists believed genetic uniformity was more controllable. Ivara defended, though without much conviction. Control is an illusion when you're dealing with living systems, Pete replied. Life finds a way to throw curveballs. Always has. Always will. The conversation flowed easily as they ate, until Easton noticed Ivara staring intently at something on her wrist, a device that had begun pulsing with a subtle red light. Is something wrong? He asked. The princess hesitated. Perhaps. I am receiving unusual security alerts from the palace. My absence has been noted. She stood abruptly. I must return temporarily to maintain appearances, but I will come back tomorrow to continue our lessons. Before either man could respond, she had activated her teleportation device. The air shimmered with blue light, and she vanished. Pete whistled low. You've got yourself entangled in imperial politics. My friend, better watch your step. I'm just teaching her to grow food, Easton protested. Nothing's ever that simple when royalty's involved, Pete warned. Especially alien royalty with interstellar empires at stake. Easton couldn't argue with that logic. As he cleared the dinner dishes, he wondered what exactly he had gotten himself into, and whether teaching ancient agricultural practices to an alien princess could really save trillions of lives. The next morning, Ivara returned as promised. But something had changed. The confidence in her bearing had been replaced by a wary vigilance. Her skin fluctuated between agitated patterns of indigo and crimson. "What happened?" Easton asked as they walked to the fields. "Politics," she replied tersely. "My uncle, Lord Corrin, questions my absence. He heads the agricultural authority and takes my interest in earth methods as a personal affront." "Is that a problem?" "Potentially." She glanced skyward, as if checking for surveillance. "He has the Emperor's ear. My father trusts his judgment in matters of food security." "And you don't?" Ivara's three eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of internal conflict. Easton had learned. "I was raised to respect the authorities' protocols, but results speak louder than protocols, and our results are mass starvation." They reached the previous day's plantings, and Ivara gasped. Despite being just 24 hours in the ground, the seeds had already sprouted, pushing green shoots through the dark soil. "How is this possible, without growth accelerants?" "Just good soil and viable seeds," Easton explained. "Living systems want to grow. Your hyper-controlled environments might produce perfectly uniform plants, but they do it by fighting against nature, not working with it." The lesson progressed to seed saving, the art of selecting the best performers from each crop to provide seed for future plantings. Easton showed Ivara how generations of careful selection had adapted his varieties to local conditions, creating plants that thrived in his specific microclimate. "The key is genetic diversity within populations," he explained, showing her tomatoes from the same variety that nonetheless displayed subtle variations. When conditions change, whether it's weather, pests, or diseases, different individuals within the population respond differently. Some fail, but others thrive. By saving seeds from the survivors, you gradually build resilience. "Our scientists would consider such variation a failure," Ivara noted. "Uniformity is the standard by which success is measured. And that's exactly why your entire system collapsed when faced with a new pathogen." Easton handed her a magnifying glass to examine the seed structures more closely. Uniformity is the opposite of resilience. Nature knows this. That's why sexual reproduction exists in the first place, to create genetic diversity. As the day progressed, Easton noticed Ivara frequently checking her wrist device, her anxiety visibly increasing each time. During their midday break, the device suddenly projected a holographic image. Another Zephyrian, older, male, with elaborate facial markings denoting high rank. "Princess Ivara," the figure spoke sharply. "Your presence is required immediately. The Agricultural Authority has called an emergency session. Your absence has been noted and questioned." "Lord Corrin," Ivara acknowledged stiffly. "I am engaged in research that may benefit our people." "Consorting with primitive earth farmers is hardly research," Corrin sneered, his gaze shifting to take in Easton and the farm beyond. "Return at once, or I shall be forced to inform the Emperor of your dereliction of duty during our greatest crisis." The hologram vanished before Ivara could respond. Her skin had paled to a sickly gray. "I must go," she said quietly. "Politics cannot be ignored, especially now." "Will you return?" Easton asked. "I will try." She activated her device. "Continue the plantings. Document everything. Our people's survival may depend on it." With that, she vanished in the now familiar blue light, leaving Easton alone with rows of freshly sprouting companion plants and a growing sense of unease. 3 days passed without any sign of the princess. Eastston continued his work, carefully documenting the growth of their experimental plantings and preparing new demonstrations for Ibarra's return. Pete stopped by daily, bringing news from town and increasingly concerned about the interstellar entanglement. Government types been asking questions, he reported on the third evening. Men in suits poking around about unusual activity in the area. Think your princess friend stirred up a hornet's nest. Before Easton could respond, the air in his kitchen shimmered with the now familiar blue light. But when it solidified, the figure that appeared was not Ibarra, but a male Zephyrian in what appeared to be a military uniform. "Eastston of Earth," the alien intoned formally. "I am Commander Vex of the Imperial Guard. I am instructed to bring you to Princess Ibarra immediately." Easton exchanged glances with Pete, who subtly reached for the shotgun he kept mounted above the kitchen door. "Why doesn't she come here?" Easton asked cautiously. "The princess is indisposed. Her request is urgent." The commander extended a hand, holding what looked like a small disc. "This will provide safe passage. The princess insists time is of the essence." After a moment's hesitation, Eastston nodded to Pete, a silent request to watch over the farm, and accepted the disc. The blue light engulfed him immediately, and the farm kitchen dissolved around him. The teleportation was disorienting, a sensation of being simultaneously everywhere and nowhere. When reality reasserted itself, Eastston found himself in what appeared to be a massive greenhouse. But unlike any he had seen on Earth, crystalline walls soared hundreds of feet overhead, enclosing an area the size of several football fields. But instead of the lush growth such a structure should support, the vast space contained only withered plants and empty hydroponic channels. Standing in the center of this monument to agricultural failure was Princess Ibarra, her royal garments replaced by a simple laboratory uniform. Her skin had taken on a dull, matte quality that Easton instinctively recognized as poor health. "You came," she said, relief evident in her voice. "I wasn't certain Commander Vex would find you, or that you would agree." "You disappeared for 3 days. I was worried." Easton looked around at the failed growing systems. "Is this the Central Agricultural Propagation Facility of the Zephyrian Empire?" she confirmed. "Or what remains of it? The pathogen has contaminated every system, every substrate." She gestured to several Zephyrian scientists working frantically at control panels. "These are the few I trust, researchers who question the orthodoxy of the Agricultural Authority." "And why am I here? Surely you don't expect me to fix all this with some companion planting." Ibarra's 3 eyes focused intently on him. "I brought you here because I believe the crop failures are not an accident, nor a natural occurrence. I believe they are deliberate." The accusation hung in the air between them, monstrous in its implications. "Deliberate? You're suggesting someone is intentionally starving trillions?" "Yes." Ibarra led him to a secure laboratory area, sealed off from the main facility. Inside, microscopes and analysis equipment surrounded central tables, covered with plant specimens and soil samples. "Look at these." She activated a holographic display showing microscopic images of what Easton assumed was the pathogen. Strange, crystalline structures that seemed to pulsate with unnatural regularity. "This is no naturally evolved organism," she explained. "Its structure is too perfect, too engineered, and it targets a very specific genetic sequence, one that my uncle, Lord Corrin, insisted be incorporated into every approved crop variety across the Empire over the past decade." "For what purpose?" "Uniformity, standardization, control." Ibarra's voice was bitter. "Or so we were told. But now I believe it was to create a vulnerability that could be exploited at the right moment." "By your uncle." Eastston could scarcely comprehend the scale of such treachery. "He stands to gain the most, with the Emperor distracted by the crisis and blame falling on current agricultural leadership. Corin positions himself as the savior with a new solution, one I suspect he has prepared in advance. Easton studied the pathogen images, the systematic nature of the crop failures suddenly making terrible sense. You need evidence. Precisely. And I need your help to develop a viable alternative before Corin consolidates power. She gestured to Earth soil samples she had apparently brought back. These contain microbial communities, unlike anything in our sterilized systems. They may hold the key to creating resistant varieties. You're talking about a complete agricultural revolution, Easton said slowly, overturning centuries of practice. I am talking about survival, Ivara replied simply. Will you help? Before he could answer, alarms blared throughout the facility. Commander Vex burst into the laboratory, his uniform disheveled. Imperial forces have entered the facility, he reported tersely. Lord Corin leads them personally. They know the Earth Farmer is here. We must leave immediately. Ivara gathered critical samples and data crystals. Corin will not allow Earth methods to threaten his plans. Where can we go? Easton asked, suddenly aware of how far from home he was. I have a secondary research facility established in the southern mountains. It's primitive by our standards, but Corin doesn't know about it. She activated her teleportation device. Commander, secure our retreat. Vex nodded grimly. It has been an honor, Princess. As the blue light began to envelop them, the laboratory doors burst open. Zephyrian guards flooded in, led by an ornately dressed figure that could only be Lord Corin. His face contorted with rage as he saw Easton and Ivara disappearing in the teleportation field. Seize them! He roared, but his order came too late. The laboratory dissolved, and Easton felt himself once again suspended between realities. When the world reformed, they stood in a small cave, outfitted with basic equipment, a far cry from the Imperial facility they had just fled. Through the cave opening, Easton could see an alien landscape of purple-hued vegetation and towering rock formations beneath an emerald sky. Welcome to Zephyria Prime, Ivara said grimly. The throne world of our empire, and now the center of a conspiracy that threatens everything. For the next 2 weeks, Easton and Ivara worked tirelessly in their hidden mountain facility. The princess had managed to smuggle essential Earth samples and seeds before their escape, and they now raced to develop resilient crop varieties that could withstand the engineered pathogen. The work was challenging. Zephyrian environmental conditions differed significantly from Earth's, requiring careful adaptation of traditional growing methods. While the basic principles of companion planting and soil ecology remained valid, the specific implementations needed adjustment. Your soil microbes are remarkable, Ivara observed as she studied samples under a microscope. Some species are actually consuming the pathogen, using it as a food source. Nature abhors a vacuum, Easton replied, working nearby to prepare experimental growing containers. On Earth, for every pest or disease, there eventually emerges a predator or parasite to keep it in check. The problem with your agricultural systems is that you eliminated all those potential checks and balances in pursuit of control. They established test plots using various combinations of earth crops and native Zephyrian plants, documenting which companions showed natural resistance to the pathogen. Each successful pairing was carefully propagated, seeds collected and stored for potential large-scale implementation. Ivara proved an apt student, her initial discomfort with primitive methods giving way to genuine appreciation for the elegant complexity of natural systems. Her scientific training, combined with Easton's generational knowledge, created a powerful synergy. Their isolation was broken occasionally by secure communications from Ivara's trusted allies within the palace. The news was increasingly dire. Lord Corin had convinced Emperor Zolan to place him in charge of the crisis response, granting him unprecedented authority. Food riots had broken out on 3 worlds. The Imperial propaganda machine blamed foreign saboteurs, specifically naming Earth as a possible culprit. "He's positioning himself for a power grab," Ibarra said grimly after one such update. "Using the crisis he created to eliminate opposition and potentially even depose my father." "We need to move faster," Easton replied, reviewing their progress. "These small tests are promising, but scaling up to feed trillions will require resources we don't have." "Perhaps not." Ibarra activated a holographic display showing palace schematics. "In 3 days, the Grand Agricultural Council meets to hear Corrin's proposal for resolving the crisis. Every major agricultural authority and planetary representative will be present. It's the perfect opportunity to present an alternative and expose his treachery." "You're talking about walking into the Viper's nest," Easton protested. "He'll have you arrested the moment you appear." "Not if we have proof and a solution." Ibarra pointed to their most successful experimental plot, where a hybrid variety combining Earth genetic diversity with Zephyrian adaptations had shown complete resistance to the pathogen. "We'll bring living proof." "It's too dangerous," Easton insisted. "Send the evidence remotely." "My people respond to presence, to personal authority," Ibarra countered. "Remote testimony would be dismissed as fabrication. I must be there, must show them with my own hands what is possible." She placed those hands on Easton's shoulders. "And I need you beside me, the Earth farmer whose primitive methods saved an empire." Easton wanted to refuse, to suggest alternatives, but he recognized the steel in her three-eyed gaze. This was the face of a future empress, one who would risk everything for her people's survival. "All right," he conceded, "but we do this smart. We need contingencies, escape routes, and most importantly, irrefutable evidence of Corrin's involvement." Over the next 3 days, they prepared meticulously. Salon, Ibarra's trusted royal advisor, who had been secretly supporting their work, provided palace security protocols and arranged for allies to be strategically positioned during the council meeting. Commander Vex, who had survived his confrontation with Corrin's forces, assembled a small team of loyal guards. The hybrid crops were carefully transplanted into portable growing containers, their root systems intact within living soil. Easton instructed Ibarra in the presentation, emphasizing the visual impact of healthy plants among the council chambers of sterile elegance. On the morning of the council meeting, Easton found himself dressed in formal Zephyrian attire, uncomfortable garments that seemed designed more for display than function. Ibarra, resplendent in her full royal regalia, performed final checks on their plant specimens and evidence data crystals. "Ready?" she asked, her skin shifting through patterns that Easton had learned to recognize as a complex mixture of determination, fear, and hope. "As I'll ever be," he replied, adjusting his earth-made tools, tucked discreetly into the alien garments. "Let's go save your empire." The teleportation was precisely targeted, materializing them in an antechamber adjacent to the Grand Council Hall. Salon waited for them, his normally composed demeanor showing signs of strain. "Princess, the council has already convened," he reported. "Lord Corrin speaks now, presenting his solution to the crisis." "Perfect timing," Ibarra replied. "What is his proposal?" "He claims to have developed a new agricultural system, one that eliminates soil entirely and grows crops in fully synthetic environments. He calls it pure cultivation." Easton and Ibarra exchanged knowing glances. Such a system would increase dependence on the Agricultural Authority, Corrin's power base, while doing nothing to address the fundamental vulnerability of monoculture. "Are we ready?" Ibarra asked Commander Vex, who stood guard at the chamber entrance. "Security is positioned as planned, Your Highness. But be warned, Corrin has doubled the Imperial Guard presence. We proceed regardless." Ibarra gathered her resolve visibly, her skin settling into the deep, steady blue of royal authority. "Easton, stay close. When I give the signal, Bring forward the specimens. The massive doors to the council chamber swung open, and they stepped into a scene of imperial grandeur. Hundreds of Zephyrian dignitaries sat in tiered seating, surrounding a central speaking platform, where Lord Corran addressed the assembly. Emperor Zolan presided from an elevated throne, his ornate headdress and regalia marking him as the absolute ruler of 17 worlds. "And so, honored representatives," Corran was saying, his voice carrying effortlessly through the vast space. "With pure cultivation, we eliminate all variables, all uncertainties. No soil to harbor contaminants, no ecological complexity to manage. Absolute control means absolute security." "A beautiful fantasy," Ivara's voice rang out as she strode confidently down the central aisle. "But fantasy nonetheless." A collective gasp rose from the assembly. Emperor Zolan leaned forward, his expression unreadable behind his ceremonial mask. "Daughter," he acknowledged, his tone cautious. "The council was informed you were indisposed with research duties." "Indeed, father. Research that has borne fruit." She ascended to the speaking platform, positioning herself opposite Corran, whose face had hardened into barely contained fury. "Princess Ivara," he said, voice dripping with false concern. "Your dedication is admirable, but this is hardly the place for untested theories. The Council requires practical solutions to our immediate crisis. Then, practical solutions they shall have." Ivara gestured to Eastston, who stepped forward, carrying the growing containers. "May I present Eastston of Earth, keeper of ancient agricultural wisdom that predates our empire." Murmurs rippled through the assembly as Easton set the containers on the display table. Inside each, healthy plants grew in rich, dark soil, a stark contrast to the withered specimens that had become commonplace throughout the empire. "These plants," Ivara announced, "grow in living soil, using companion methods developed on Earth over millennia. More importantly, they are completely resistant to the pathogen currently destroying our food supply." Corran scoffed. "Primitive dirt farming? This is your solution to an empire-wide crisis. These few plants could not feed a single city, let alone trillions. The principles can be scaled." Eastston spoke for the first time, his steady farmer's voice carrying surprising authority in the Grand Chamber. "What matters is the approach, diversity instead of uniformity, cooperation instead of isolation, resilience instead of control. But most importantly," Ivara continued, "these plants expose the truth behind our current crisis." She activated a holographic display, showing detailed analysis of the pathogen. "This is no natural evolution. This is an engineered bioweapon, designed specifically to target the genetic sequence that Lord Corran himself mandated be included in all imperial crop varieties." The council erupted in shocked exclamations. Emperor Zolan rose to his feet, silencing the chamber with a gesture. "These are grave accusations. Daughter, what proof do you offer?" Ivara nodded to Salon, who stepped forward with data crystals. "Complete laboratory analysis. Your Majesty. The pathogen structure includes artificially created sequences that could only have been developed in high-security imperial facilities under Lord Corran's direct control." Corran's composure cracked. "Lies and fabrications! This Earth primitive has poisoned the princess's mind with his backward notions." "Then you won't mind submitting to a full investigation of your research facilities?" Ivara challenged. "Particularly the sealed laboratory beneath the Agricultural Authority headquarters?" The color drained from Corran's face, confirming Ivara's suspicions. With a sudden movement, he reached for a concealed weapon, but Commander Vex was faster. The Imperial Guard disarmed Corran before he could fire, forcing him to his knees before the Emperor. "Father," Ivara addressed Emperor Zolan directly, "while Corran's treachery is investigated, our people still starve. I propose an immediate implementation of Earth-inspired agricultural methods, beginning with the hybrid varieties we have developed." She gestured to the thriving plants. These seeds can be propagated quickly. With proper instruction in companion planting and soil management, we can begin restoring food production within weeks. Emperor Zolan studied the healthy plants, then looked to the council representatives, many of whom were nodding in cautious agreement. The empire has always prided itself on embracing superior methods, regardless of source, he said finally. If Earth wisdom offers salvation where our technology has failed, so be it. He pointed to Corin. Remove the traitor for interrogation. As for you, daughter, you will oversee this agricultural transformation personally. With Easton's assistance, Ivara stipulated. His knowledge is essential to our success. The Emperor inclined his head in acknowledgement. So be it. The Earth Farmer shall be honored as a friend of the Empire. As Imperial guards led Corin away, Easton stepped closer to Ivara. Well, he murmured, I came here to teach farming, not topple governments. In times of crisis, they become one and the same, she replied softly. Now the real work begins. The aftermath of the council meeting unfolded with the efficiency characteristic of the Zepyrian Empire. Corin's interrogation revealed the full scope of his treachery, a years-long plot to create agricultural dependency, trigger a crisis, and position himself as the savior whose pure cultivation would grant him unprecedented control over the Empire's food supply. With Corin removed from power, Ivara implemented a rapid transformation of imperial agriculture. The Central Agricultural Facility was converted into the Zepyrian Earth Cooperative Research Center, where traditional earth farming methods were studied, adapted, and integrated with compatible Zepyrian technologies. Easton found himself elevated from simple farmer to honored imperial advisor, a role he accepted with reluctance but growing commitment. His seed vault back on Earth was carefully transported to Zepyria Prime, its contents becoming the foundation for a new imperial seed bank, emphasizing genetic diversity and adaptability. We'll need to train thousands of teachers, Easton advised, as they planned the empire-wide implementation. People who understand both the science and the intuition of working with living systems. Already in progress, Ivara replied, showing him plans for the Imperial Agricultural Academy. We're recruiting from both worlds, experienced earth farmers and Zepyrian scientists willing to embrace new methods. The first large-scale harvests exceeded even their optimistic projections. The hybrid varieties, combining Earth genetic diversity with Zepyrian adaptability, thrived in the alien environments of all 17 worlds. More importantly, the companion planting methods created resilient growing systems capable of withstanding not just Corin's engineered pathogen, but a variety of natural challenges as well. As food security gradually returned to the Empire, Easton found himself increasingly drawn into imperial politics, a realm as complex and interconnected as the soil ecosystems he had spent his life studying. Ivara proved an adept political operator, using the agricultural crisis to implement broader reforms throughout the empire. You've changed, he observed one evening, as they walked through the Royal Botanical Gardens, now replanted with Earth Zepyrian hybrids, arranged in traditional companion groupings. As have you, she replied, her skin shifting to the warm golden hues that Easton had come to recognize as contentment. Crisis reveals our true nature. I think. And what has it revealed about us? Ivara's three eyes regarded him thoughtfully. That you are not merely a keeper of seeds, but a keeper of wisdom, and that I am not merely my father's daughter, but my people's servant. Their relationship had evolved alongside the imperial agriculture, from teacher and student to partners in a revolution that spanned worlds. The cultural differences remained significant, but they had developed a deep mutual respect that transcended planetary boundaries. Emperor Zolan, impressed by the success of the agricultural transformation, granted Ivara expanded authority to implement further reforms. The princess established trade agreements with Earth, exchanging Zephyrian technology for agricultural diversity and expertise. Pete and other seed keepers from Easton's network were invited to consult, creating a bridge between worlds that had previously viewed each other with suspicion or dismissal. 1 year after the council confrontation, the first Imperial Seed Exchange Festival was held, a celebration of agricultural diversity and interplanetary cooperation. Representatives from all 17 Zephyrian worlds brought their newly developed varieties, adapted from Earth stock, but evolved to thrive in their specific environments. Easton watched with quiet pride as farmers, both human and Zephyrian, traded seeds and knowledge, forming connections that transcended species and planetary boundaries. The Imperial Palace grounds, once manicured to sterile perfection, now bloomed with organized chaos, companion plantings demonstrating the principles that had saved the Empire. "Hard to believe it all started with a desperate princess appearing in my seed vault," he remarked to Ivara, who stood beside him in ceremonial attire. "The best partnerships often begin in crisis," she replied, "when pride and prejudice must give way to survival." Emperor Zolan approached, his imperial regalia softened by the addition of Earth agricultural symbols, a diplomatic nod to their new allies. "Earthkeeper," he addressed Easton formally, "the Empire owes you a debt that cannot be repaid. You have not merely saved our people from starvation. You have transformed our understanding of what it means to cultivate life." Easton bowed awkwardly, still uncomfortable with Imperial protocol. "The knowledge wasn't mine alone, Your Majesty. It belongs to generations of Earth farmers who understood that we don't control nature. We cooperate with it." "A lesson my daughter has taken to heart," the Emperor observed, glancing at Ivara with obvious pride. "She speaks of establishing a permanent exchange between our worlds, not just of seeds and techniques, but of people, cultural ambassadors who will learn from each other." "A wise proposal," Easton agreed, careful to maintain the formal tone expected in the Emperor's presence. "She also speaks," Zolan continued, a hint of amusement in his voice, "of a more personal alliance, one that would symbolize the new relationship between our worlds." Easton felt heat rise to his face as he realized the Emperor's meaning. He and Ivara had grown increasingly close during their work together, but neither had spoken openly of deeper feelings, the differences between their species and cultures creating an unspoken barrier. "Father," Ivara interrupted, her skin flushing with embarrassment, "such matters are not for public discussion." "Perhaps not," the Emperor conceded, "but they are for imperial consideration. Traditions must sometimes yield to new realities." He nodded to them both, before moving on to greet other festival participants. Left alone, Easton and Ivara stood in awkward silence, the Emperor's words hanging between them. "He means well," Ivara said finally, "but he moves too quickly, as always." "And you?" Easton asked, finding courage in the festivities around them, a living testament to the possibility of unlikely unions bearing fruit. "What do you think?" Ivara's skin shifted through patterns he had learned to read as thoughtfulness, uncertainty, and something deeper, a warmth that appeared only when they were together. "I think," she said carefully, "that the most resilient systems are those with the strongest connections between diverse elements." She extended her six-fingered hand toward his. "And I think we have much yet to learn from each other." Easton took her hand, feeling the alien texture of her skin against his calloused palm. Different, yet complementary. "In farming," he replied, "we say the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Is that a yes, Earthkeeper?" Her three eyes sparkled with hope. "It's a beginning," he answered, squeezing her hand gently. "And like all good plantings, we'll see what grows." 2 years later, the Interplanetary Agricultural Academy opened its doors on Zephyria Prime, welcoming students from Earth and all 17 worlds of the Empire. At its heart stood a replica of Easton's original seed vault, expanded to house millions of varieties from both planetary systems. The marriage of Princess Ivara and Eastston, the first official union between human and Zephyrian, had catalyzed a new era of cooperation. While political conservatives on both worlds had initially objected, the undeniable success of their agricultural partnership had silenced most critics. Emperor Zolon, aging but still vital, presided over the Academy's opening ceremony. Beside him stood Ivara, now officially named heir to the imperial throne, and Eastston, who had reluctantly accepted the title of Imperial Agricultural Advisor while insisting on maintaining his identity as, first and foremost, a farmer. From the brink of starvation to a new golden age, the emperor proclaimed to the assembled dignitaries, from isolation to partnership, from uniformity to diversity, this is the legacy of the Great Renewal. After the ceremony, Eastston slipped away from the formal celebrations to visit the Academy's experimental fields, where students were already implementing new companion groupings and hybrid varieties. He found satisfaction in the sight of young Zephyrians kneeling in soil, their hands, no longer gloved or protected, connecting directly with the living earth. Ivara found him there, as twilight painted Zephyria's emerald sky with streaks of gold and crimson. "Hiding from the politicians again?" she asked, her voice carrying the musical lilt that still entranced him. "Just checking on the real work," he replied, gesturing to the thriving fields. "Politics comes and goes. This remains—" She nodded in understanding, having learned to appreciate his Earth farmer's perspective on priorities. The first seed ships depart tomorrow, 17 vessels, each carrying diversity to a different world. The seed ships represented the culmination of their vision, specially designed vessels carrying not just seeds, but entire soil ecosystems to restore agricultural resilience throughout the empire. Each ship also carried teachers, both human and Zephyrian, who would train local farmers in the integrated methods they had developed. "It's really happening," Easton marveled, still sometimes surprised by how far their work had progressed from those first desperate plantings. "Because of you," Ivara said, taking his hand. Her skin had developed new patterns since their marriage, unique combinations that reflected their shared experiences and growing bond. "Because of us," he corrected. "Neither could have done it alone. That's the whole point, isn't it? Monocultures fail. Diversity thrives." She laughed, the sound like chiming bells. "You've turned me into a philosopher farmer, speaking in Earth proverbs. And you've turned me into an interplanetary diplomat. Fair exchange." As night fell over the Academy fields, they walked together through rows of plants that represented both worlds, Earth heritage and Zephyrian innovation growing side by side, distinct yet harmonious. Above them, the first stars appeared in the alien sky, while beneath their feet, billions of microorganisms worked in concert to sustain life. Two different worlds, connected by the most fundamental of needs, to grow food, to nurture life, to ensure that the next generation would not only survive, but thrive. Their partnership had begun with desperation and necessity, but had grown into something neither could have imagined, much like the seeds they had planted together, taking root and flourishing in unexpected ways. "What comes next?" Easton asked, gazing up at the emerging constellations that he was slowly learning to recognize. "Tomorrow," Ivara replied simply, "we plant another field." And in that answer lay everything that mattered. The daily commitment to growth, to care, to patient cultivation of possibilities, not just for themselves or their unusual union, but for the billions of lives that depended on the wisdom they had combined and the systems they had transformed. As they turned back toward the Academy buildings, now illuminated against the darkness, Eastston reflected on the journey that had brought him here, from a solitary seed keeper on a remote Earth farm to a pivotal figure in an interstellar agricultural revolution. The path had been neither straight nor easy, but like the most resilient plants, it had adapted to conditions, found unexpected allies, and ultimately thrived. The Zephyrian Empire was changing, becoming something new, something more resilient and diverse, something that honored both the advanced technology they had mastered and the ancient wisdom they had nearly forgotten. And at the heart of that transformation was the simple, profound truth that Easton had lived by all his life. Everything starts with understanding seeds, soil, and the complex web of relationships that sustains all life, regardless of which world it calls home.